Check. In chess, check means your opponent's piece is threatening to capture your king. Checkmate. When a player's king is in a position to be captured and there is no legal move to escape and thus the game ends. En passant. A special pawn capture that can occur immediately after a pawn moves 2 squares forward from its starting position. Castling. A special move involving the king and either rook of the same color along the player's first rank. Fork. When one piece attacks 2 or more of the opponent's pieces simultaneously. Pin. When a piece is restricted from moving because moving it would expose a more valuable piece to capture. Skewer. A tactic where a valuable piece is attacked and forced to move, exposing a less valuable piece behind it. Zwischenzug. An unexpected move made in the middle of a sequence of moves, often disrupting the opponent's plans. Discovered attack. When one piece moves to reveal an attack by another piece behind it. Deflection. A tactic used to distract an opponent's piece from defending a more valuable square or piece. Sacrifice. Intentionally giving up a piece for positional or tactical advantage. Fianchetto. A pawn move where a bishop is developed to the long diagonal by moving the pawn in front of it. Back rank mate. Checkmate delivered by a rook or queen on the opponent's back rank, often exploiting the lack of escape squares for the opponent's king. Stalemate. A situation in which the player whose turn it is to move has no legal moves and their king is not in check. The game ends in a draw. Perpetual check. A situation where one player continuously checks the opponent's king, resulting in a draw if the checking sequence repeats 3 times. Endgame. The stage of the game where most of the pieces have been exchanged and there are fewer pieces left on the board. Open file. A file, vertical column, on the chessboard that contains no pawns from either player. Sicilian Defense. A popular opening move sequence characterized by black responding to 1.e4 with c5, aiming for dynamic counterplay. Gambit. An opening strategy where a player sacrifices material, usually a pawn, to gain an advantage in position or development. Exchange. The capture of pieces of equal value, often referring to the exchange of rooks, bishops, or knights. Time control. The rules governing the maximum amount of time each player has to make their moves during a game, often specified in minutes per player or moves per time increment. Centralization. The act of moving pieces towards the center of the board to control key squares and improve their mobility. Double attack. A tactic where a single piece attacks 2 or more enemy pieces simultaneously. Zugzwang. A situation in which a player would prefer to pass and make no move because any move would worsen their position. X-ray attack. A tactic where a piece indirectly attacks an enemy piece through another piece. Windmill. A tactic involving a series of checks delivered by a single piece, usually a queen or rook, forcing the opponent to move their king back and forth. Discovered check. A tactic where moving one piece places the opponent's king in check by revealing an attack from another piece. Overloading. A tactic where a defender is assigned multiple responsibilities, causing it to become overloaded and unable to adequately protect all of them. Interference. A tactic where the movement or placement of one piece obstructs the action or protection of another piece. Queen's Gambit. An opening where white offers a pawn to gain control of the center and facilitate piece development, typically by playing d4 followed by c4. King's Gambit. An aggressive opening where white sacrifices a pawn, f2, to gain a lead in development and attack black's position. Battery. 2 or more pieces of the same color lined up on a rank, file, or diagonal, typically used to exert pressure on a target square or piece. Passed pawn. A pawn that has no opposing pawns to prevent it from advancing to the 8th rank, where it can promote to a stronger piece. Hanging piece. A piece that is undefended and vulnerable to capture by the opponent. Underpromotion. Promoting a pawn to a piece other than a queen, usually to gain a tactical advantage or avoid stalemate. Pawn structure. The arrangement of pawns on the board, which significantly influences the character and strategy of the game. Outpost. A square controlled by a pawn and inaccessible to enemy pawns, where a knight or bishop can be stationed as an effective outpost. Minor piece, either a bishop or knight, distinguished from the major pieces based on their relative value and movement capabilities. Color complex. A group of squares of the same color that are controlled or influenced by a player's pawns or pieces, often used to describe the strategic strengths and weaknesses of a position. Hook. A pawn move that creates a weakness in the opponent's pawn structure, often used to lure enemy pawns forward or create open lines for attack. Connected passed pawns. 2 or more adjacent passed pawns of the same color that support each other's advance and are difficult for the opponent to stop. Blockade. a strategy where a player uses their pieces to prevent the advance of the opponent's pawns, aiming to restrict their mobility and create weaknesses. Prophylaxis, a strategic concept where a player makes preventive moves to anticipate and neutralize the opponent's threats before they materialize. Luft, a German term meaning air, used to describe the creation of breathing space for the king by advancing a pawn in front of it to prevent backrank mate threats. Kibitzer, a person who offers unsolicited advice or commentary on a chess game, often used informally to refer to spectators or bystanders. Clearance sacrifice, sacrificing a piece to clear a path or open lines for another piece to execute a decisive attack or maneuver. Pawn majority, a situation where a player has more pawns on one side of the board compared to their opponent, often leading to potential pawn advances and the creation of a passed pawn. Reti Opening, a hypermodern opening characterized by white's flexible development, often delaying the occupation of the center with pawns and instead focusing on piece activity and control of key squares. Hedgehog Formation, a pawn structure characterized by black's pawns on the second rank, resembling the spines of a hedgehog, often used to create a solid but flexible defensive setup. Artificial castling, a maneuver where the king is moved to a safer position by hand rather than castling, often used when castling is no longer possible or advantageous due to pawn moves or threats. Triangulation, a technique where a player moves their king or other piece in a triangular pattern to waste a tempo or force the opponent into an unfavorable position. Piece coordination, the harmonious arrangement and cooperation of a player's pieces, often aimed at maximizing their effectiveness and controlling key squares or lines. Battery pawn, a pawn that is positioned in front of another pawn on the same file, often used to reinforce pawn chains or support pawn breaks. Tactical motif, a recurring pattern or theme in chess tactics such as forks, pins, skewers, discovered attacks, and double attacks, often used to identify and exploit tactical opportunities. Catalan Opening, an opening where white plays d4 and c4, aiming to maintain a strong pawn center and develop the bishop to g2, exerting pressure along the long diagonal. Overprotection, a concept introduced by Aaron Nimzowitsch involving the reinforcement of key squares or pieces beyond what is strictly necessary for defense, aiming to gain control and stability in the position.